Oh man, here they come again.
Here they come again. This still has skin on the skull.
Orang Pendek is a small hominid that's been spotted, for time immemorial throughout Indonesia, particularly in Sumatra, is where we get a lot of these reports from. And I think so. I went in there genuinely thinking that this was mistaken identity, thinking more than likely the descriptions that I'd read really reminded me of a gibbon, and that this is probably people seeing a glimpse of a gibbon, that's walking on the ground, which they occasionally do, and just having a mistaken identity. And when I got there and I did the investigation, I was wrong. I really do think that Orang Pendek either is still there or was there very recently. And there were a few things that brought me to that conclusion. The first was that the sightings of it were much better than glimpses. This was not something where someone caught out of the corner of their eye and that they were likely to mistake this for something. These were by incredibly reputable folks, who really know the forest. And in fact, somebody called me out on this and said, like, they were laughing and they said, "Look, the only people who don't believe in Orang Pendek are the people who've never been here." I
Wow.
was like, good call. Yeah, no, that's true. Who am I? I'm in your amazing country for, a few weeks. Who am I to tell you you don't know what you're seeing? Of course you do. You live here. You see this stuff all the time. And it was the kind of blasé way that they described this. Like, this was not a mythical creature. This isn't revered. This is just an animal that lives there, like a tapir or like like some of the primate species that they have. It's there. In fact, everyone was shocked that we wanted to talk about orang pendek. They wanted to talk about tigers because tigers
Right.
have this kind of other spiritual realm to them. So it's like, yeah, orang pendek is cool and all, but have I told you about the tiger that we saw the other day? So that really led me to think that this truly is real. And then the kind of nail in the coffin was Mike Morwood, who was the person who discovered Homo floresiensis, the hobbit, the small humans that lived on the island of Flores. Mike said that he believed that Homo floresiensis had survived up until the modern era. He said that he believed that they were there until the 1920s. And he said, and I said, well, is there any chance that them or a related species could still be here in Indonesia? And he goes, oh, what are there, 17,000 islands? He goes, yeah, of course, absolutely. The amount of unexplored forest here and the amount of habitat for them, absolutely. And the stories really go back. Lauren Coleman describes um, orang pendek as most likely being, two to three different species that people are seeing and kind of conflating together. And I think there's a good basis for that as well, because the stories really are pretty different. Like, there's the ones that describe more of a H. floresiensis type, hominid, and then there's ones that describe a more primate-like ground dwelling, primarily upright walking ground dwelling gibbon like animal. And I think that there probably are two different things that folks are talking about, and there would be evolutionary pressure for a gibbon or a related species to develop to be more nocturnal and to not use trails and to walk upright. There's evolutionary pressure for all of that, so it would make sense that an animal like that could exist there, and it could stay hidden.
Years ago, I mean, this is before I started the podcast, so this is definitely like 2016. We, I was in a Facebook group. I started a Facebook group, and it was about Bigfoot, and I I remember there was somebody in that group that was from the area you're talking about. I can't remember where you just mentioned, but
Sumatra, Indonesia, yeah.
yes. Uh, but because he was a local that hunted for the orang pendek,
Yeah.
and he would send pictures of footprints he was finding. And I actually had a cast of a footprint that was sent to me, and I wound up giving it to a kid at a conference when I was speaking. So he was like, he really liked it. And I was like, oh, you can have it, buddy. Like, it's just
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah, you want to encourage the kids, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it's something that it was one of the first times early on in looking at these topics that I felt like for the first time, there was actual um, believability for a broad audience on this creature, you know. I think I felt like that because we're not talking about an upright hominid that is massive. We're talking about something that is not that big, and
No,
so
like 3 or 4 feet. Yeah.
right. And so it's like, okay, it could hide from us and it could, you know, all that stuff. Where when you're talking about Bigfoot, one of the hardest things for people to get around is that it's like you're telling me that there is a 8, 10 foot creature roaming around the Pacific Northwest. Right. You know, and listen, I dig it. I love it. You know, like I literally
Yeah.
just last week, I was in Washington State hunting Bigfoot. Like that's what I did the entire week. We shot a film out there.
Awesome.
So like I'm all about it, right? But for the broad audience of people who aren't buying into these topics, it was the first time it was like a light bulb went on my head. I was like, this might be a good gateway into conversation about these things with people because it has the believability factor.
Yeah.
Um, have you noticed that at all when you talk about cryptozoology and stuff that there's easier topics to talk to people about?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So, you're completely right. So, um, when you start talking about Orang Pendek, for all of the reasons that you said, first, it's in a really exotic location. It's somewhere that most Americans haven't been. So that's one place. That's one thing that lends credence immediately. It's not like, well, I've been to Canada. I know that there's nothing up there. And it's like, well, you've been to Montreal. That's a little different, but still. But so there's that aspect of it. There's also that it isn't huge. It's not massive. It's not supposed to be aggressive. And when you do look at species, like orangutans and other things that they are much bigger than orang pendek is supposed to be, and they do exhibit some of the behaviors of it and things like that. So you start talking about smaller populations that could survive also, because people are like, well, you can't have thousands of these things out there, and it's like, well, there probably aren't. It's probably a very, very small population that doesn't have a home range, and they wander. They're very long lived, so there would be a small number of young, and they're wanderers. So when you start putting all of these together in biological terms, people are more open to it, and I think that's true with most cryptids. When you start talking about the deep ocean, people go, yeah, sure, anything could be there. Like, you could make up anything about the deep ocean. People are going to go, yeah, I guess that's possible. Because we just don't know that much about it. If you start talking about surviving remnants, like something like the thylacine, that was there pretty recently, I think people are more open to going, yeah, there may still be a couple there. Like what we've found in the community of biologists is that extinction really isn't an event. It's a process. And something could be functionally extinct, but they're still surviving. There's still a few there. And that's possible for orang orang pendek as well. A lot of the witnesses that we spoke with said, my grandparents saw it more frequently. My parents saw a few of them. I've only seen it once, and it was an old one. And that's kind of what people say. Like, nobody has seen a young orang pendek in that they knew of in decades. So, there could be a few surviving older remnants of this species still out there. And people are more, all of this starts to lend the general public kind of goes, yeah, I guess that's more possible. That does make more sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. Before we go any further, I'm starting to hear your microphone rubbing on your collar a lot.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's fine. I just want to, if I don't know if you could just turn it or whatever, but um, uh, yeah, you're good. Yeah,
Okay.
it was just it started clacking on there. I started noticing it, and
I often move around a lot also.
me too. I talk with my hands all the time. But um, so speaking about survivability, speaking about what's hidden in the oceans, you have you've got listen, I'm assuming you've explored the air at some point, but like you roamed the land, you've gone 1,000 feet in a 3-man ocean or submarine underwater. What did you see down there? But let's just go start there. What made you go down there and do that? What did it feel like physically, but also maybe psychologically to know that you have that much water above you? I'd be freaking out.
It was a childhood dream. It's one of those things that was on my bucket list. One of the things that I've always wanted to do and never thought that I'd be able to. Just cost and everything else would be prohibitive. And when we were filming an episode on sea serpents, our associate producer jokingly mentioned that she had come across a private sub company that, you know, was operating in the area we were going to be, and they could potentially bring us down, you know, in the water. And I just went, yes. Anything I need to do, I will eat nothing but power bars. I will sleep in the car, like anywhere we can cut the budget to make this happen. And they started backpedaling and were like, no, I don't think we can do this. But I was on it. And from that moment on, I was just pushing for this to be something that we could do, and think about the possibilities it opens. And even if we don't see a sea serpent, you know, what else are we going to see? And eventually I think I wore them down and got them to do this. So we were able to do it. And it was the coolest thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, you never experience darkness like the bottom of the ocean. Just absolute pitch black. Every animal you see there just looks alien and amazing. And you know, we saw jellyfish and squat lobsters and squid and I mean, things that were known, like known species, but still just phenomenal to see them in their own environment, and to see, you know, 20-foot long jellyfish just free swimming with, you know, all of its tentacles completely. It was amazing, just unreal.
Wow. Yeah, that's something that I don't plan on ever doing. It's definitely like I tend to think that I have an adventurous spirit, but not that much.
There was no fear. There was nothing. I mean, it was just pure excitement and enjoyment. And we were down there for about 2 hours. And after an hour or so, so it was me, our producer, and the pilot. So just the three of us. And me and the producer are laying on like cots, like little inflatable cots, on our stomachs. And the pilot is sitting behind us, kind of in a crouched position, like using little like remote controls like this. And after about an hour, we're just in absolute awe, just can't believe everything that we're seeing. And then I start feeling water dripping on my legs. And I turn to our producer and I go, are you? And he goes, yeah. And the pilot goes, oh no. And I was like, what? And then all of a sudden, like, you start to get a hint of fear. And then he starts laughing. He's like, I'm just kidding. It's all just condensation. It's just condensation dripping on us.
God, man, like I'm spazzing right now. Like you start talking about the water coming in. Listen, my wife has a huge fear of water. I never thought I did until just now. Holy crap! No thanks.
It was pretty wild. It was pretty nuts. I mean, but just the fact that we all felt it at the same time, so he knew what we were talking about and why we were freaking out. He's, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it was condensation.
Oh man,
but
that's wild.
Our producer is this guy Ben, who I mean, Ben has been everywhere and seen everything. This is a guy, I mean, he was almost imprisoned in Afghanistan for going into a former Soviet chemical weapons facility. Like this guy has done everything, anything you can think of. And because of that, he's super nice, but like nothing really phases him. So we were on the Amazon, and you know, and there's this beautiful moon, like the biggest moon I've ever seen, over the Amazon River. And we're all just on the deck, like in awe of this. And Ben's writing notes for the next day, and he looks up and goes, pretty, and goes back to writing the notes. Like nothing phases him. So when we're down in the sub and just in silent awe, he poked me and I looked over and he goes, this is cool. I was like, right. That's how I knew it was really unique. Like this even impressed Ben.
Yeah. Wow, that's wild. So when you're down there and you're seeing it all and taking it in, how, now that you've been there, how likely is it that you think there's possibility of either undiscovered, well, obviously undiscovered species? I mean, tons.
Yeah.
But what about remnant of things that we knew were here a long time ago and maybe sought to go extinct because we just haven't seen it, but they just live down there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at the coelacanth. Coelacanth is the perfect example of that. Like we thought that they were extinct for 160 million years, and then they find them in a fish market in Tanzania. Like they're and the locals knew about them. The locals had been pulling them up. They weren't very good eating, but they'd still sell them on the market. It's still a really big fish. Yeah, there's absolutely large undiscovered animals left to find in the deepest part of the ocean. I think even the most conservative marine biologists will own up to that and say that. And it's one of the things that's frustrating about cryptozoology. So the animals that we are the most likely to discover are a new species of bony fish a new species of squid or a new species of shark. Those are the most likely, and they may look very different than the fish, squid, and sharks that we know today. But if we found a new species of squid that could explain a lot of the sea serpent sightings in the world, maybe it has modified tentacles that can look like, a plesiosaur head. Maybe they eat birds. Maybe they've evolved to eat seabirds, so they're going to be coming out of the water more often. I mean, there's a lot of this potential. If we found that, biologists like me would love it and would freak out, and this is
Yeah.
amazing. But the general public would go, "It's a squid." And it's like, oh no, isn't that exciting? Like, so if you don't find the exact animal that people are describing in these legends, then people say you haven't found the animal. Like, if we found a new species of polar bear in Nepal, people would say, that's cool, but it's not a Yeti. And you're like, but it is. Like, why isn't it a Yeti? And that's where cryptozoology kind of diverges a little bit, where you get that anthropology and, myths and legends mixed in with biology.